20 years, Hampson has been leading multidisciplinary research collaboration across industry, government and academia to remodel the buildings and infrastructure sector. He has a distinguished record of scholarly publications, securing research funding and leading industry research team. Kit served as CEO of Australia's Sustainable Built Environmental National Research Centre, developing world-class Australian capability in key areas, including policies, practice in digital modeling, productivity, sustainability, safety, innovation, and economy to address complex problems in the built environment. The topic today, given by Professor Kit, is infrastructure in Australia, new challenges and solutions. Prof, please welcome Dr. Kit.
Thank you, Aziz. And I'm always inspired when I hear Krishna speak, and I hope that I can keep you awake over the next 20 minutes. That you should be inspired sufficiently long, I'm sure, to get to the end, because infrastructure in Australia is not quite as always as regenerative and inspiring, but it is, and it can be in parts. So I wanted to say, look, it's great to be back in Malaysia, and on a personal level, the last time I was here was too long ago. It was 2002. When under the 8th Malaysian Plan. I mean, some of you were probably alive then, but back in 2002 there was the intensification of research in prioritised areas mechanism, looking at, I contributed to the National Workshop for R&D Managers at Port Dickson. And one of the things that we looked at was internationalisation of research and the opportunity for Malaysia to be more engaged both within and contribute to the international research agenda. And some of the speakers that I've heard this morning talk about the internationalisation opportunities for construction as a business, but I also think there's an opportunity for internationalisation in R&D and to be part and a more integral part of international research networks. But before that, through QUT, we were quite active in teaching offshore modes of project management in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Hong Kong, and in Jakarta. So I was here a number of times doing that. But also, of course, and more memorably, in 1983, we're here for a month or so backpacking, and I want to highlight the difference in styles in terms of the different visits I've made. I'm delighted to be at this hotel, and backpacking is fun, but I tell you, being in a hotel like this, one sleeps better at night. So it's been a nice journey. We've also had some long-standing relationships with students who have studied in Malaysia under our on-campus or on-location teaching, but also those students who have come to Australia to teach, to learn, and to be part of the Australian student community. And Dr. Soon Kam Lim did his PhD at QUT as a CRC for Construction Innovation Scholar, the group that I previously led, and I was delighted that in 2006 Soon Kam was the Outstanding Young Malaysian award winner for that year. So it's been a nice relationship, and I want to say you're a very friendly bunch, and I'm delighted to be here surrounded by so many photographers. Setting the scene. And I was thinking that some colleagues from New Zealand might be here, but let's look at the first couple of columns here, only in the first two headings. It's difficult to see with the resolution of the digital projector here, but the Australia and Malaysia are the first two columns, and I'll make that darker next time. In round numbers, we're around about the same sort of population,
with a similar sort of unemployment. In some respects, we've got similar expectations, I suspect, when it comes to infrastructure. Increasing standard of living, a growing economy, but also expectations around infrastructure to deliver a standard of living that is growing. And when I heard the presentation this morning about the size of the Malaysian industry, it's not all that dissimilar in size to the Australian industry. Ours is around 200 billion Australian dollars, about 620 billion ringgit, and I think yours is around 500 billion. So a similar size, similar scale of employment, about 1 million people, similar number of firms, many small firms, so the challenges of research making their way into SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises, is a common problem. Our economy, our construction economy, is slowing and growing at the same time. We're building a lot of houses, so the residential and the transport infrastructure in bold at the bottom are good areas to be in, but the commercial and industrial and resources and mining industries are declining. Still great opportunity, and I suspect in transport infrastructure in Malaysia and transport infrastructure in Australia, it's a good time to be in infrastructure. In respect of the centre that I lead, the Sustainable Built Environment National Research Centre, our goal is to be world-class. World-class as a knowledge broker. We don't do a lot of the work. We bring people together almost as a marriage broker to bring together the knowledge, and individuals bring industry, government and researchers together to do work around sustainable infrastructure and building design, construction and management. So we traverse the supply chain of the industry. But importantly, we rely on investment from partners. So in the basics, the value is that we deliver research that adds value to our partners' businesses. And in that sense, Krishna, we actually structure it around the old-fashioned triple bottom line, simply because it's a good structure to think about. It's an impervious boundary between economic, social and environmental sustainability, but it's applied research. We don't do long-term blue sky research. Typically our projects are 18 months duration. And importantly, the last dot point there is we do applied research and industry outreach across integrated themes. So we place a large importance on the publications, the YouTube clips, the workshops, the presentations, the internal pilot studies and the research into practice, because we're about innovation, we're about taking ideas through to practice. In the infrastructure focus, the idea is around trying to deliver on the sweet spot of the program funding, getting the best sustainable practices around energy, water, quality of life, but also around the jobs and building future capacity. So that sweet spot is one that we seek to achieve. Program leaders across the country, and we've been going this year 20 years. Back when Robin Drogomir, who will speak soon, were much younger, in 1996 we had the CSIRO QUT Construction Research Alliance. Through various morphing of organisations and funding schemes, and today I'm pleased to say that we have a good chunk of our funding locked into 2021. Back in 1996 it seemed like a distant dream, but it's become a part of the landscape in Australian research that has really been built on relationships and value. These core members are growing core members across the major states of Australia and some of the major private partners with universities in Griffith University, Swinburne and our headquarters at Curtin University provide the strategic direction at the board level. You'll note that on that list that the industry or government end users of research are in the majority, as they are in the research programs, as they are in the research projects. So our direction, our management and the diffusion of outcomes is very much industry-led. And we work across the industry, employers and employees, product manufacturers, and policy planning, design, construction, asset managers, and importantly, industry associations and universities and institutes around the world. This is a slide that I used in 1996. I use it because it brings back good memories, but it still reinforces what it is that we're doing. And I don't want to ever walk away from the focus that we build bridges. We build bridges between researchers and research users. And though it's not a high-tech YouTube video, it sends the same message today to what it was when we started 20 years ago, is that we try to ensure that industry, government and research are talking with a similar language, and importantly have a common respect for each other's contribution to making a difference to industry development. Let's move to the roads context particularly. I mean, roads are pretty important in Australia. We're a big country with not many integrated rail systems. So we've got about a $25 billion Australian road construction industry per year in new road construction. It's a big industry. Maintenance bill is around $5 billion a year. There's almost 1 million kilometres of roads. 50,000 kilometres of those are highways. And so it's a serious part of about binding our communities together. Without the roads, we don't have the connectivity. We don't have the ability to sustain communities, and we certainly don't have the ability to respond to emergencies, either natural or man-made. We've got about 5 current projects in the infrastructure research space, and I wanted to touch on just a couple of those this afternoon. Strategies and solutions for the future of roads, sustainable infrastructure and transport network resilience. We've got a common basis for each of these, and that is getting more from less. Shrinking government budgets, growing expectations from the private sector, and a community that demands more from, let's say, less taxes, as we've got increasing pressures on ageing population, health and education. There is typically an expectation, and I suspect it's the same in Malaysia and across the globe, that we want more from less. In the Future of Roads project, we look at technologies and processes, particularly in renewables, lighting and smart motorways, the sustainability rating tool, and I know the theme of this conference is around sustainability, and low carbon living. And I wanted just to run a couple of moments of this.
The Sustainable Built Environment National Research Centre is a new blend of industry.
It's really about how we're going about looking for the future of roads in the Australian context.
Roads are a crucial part of Australia's transportation infrastructure and will continue to be in the foreseeable future. However, road construction and management face growing pressure to respond to a number of challenges resulting from climate change and fossil fuel dependence.
That's enough.
I think it's important to recognise the crucial role that roads play in our way of life. If we don't have a highly functioning roads network, or other transport networks for that matter, then our economy suffers and our way of life will suffer. What is critical is how these roads are designed, constructed, operated and disposed of at end of life. And what we're seeing more and more is that the owners of large infrastructure want more solutions to make their assets more sustainable.
The past decade in Australia has seen a focus on minimising the ecological disturbance of roads in their design, operation and management. And Australia's road agencies have done extremely well at that. The next phase, however, is taking in a more holistic sustainability framework, which incorporates not only the ecological management or minimising the ecological footprint or impact of roads, but incorporating the cultural and economic impact of roads as well. The IAS rating tool by ISCA has been developed by industry for this exact purpose. This tool is quickly becoming a standard in the operation, design and management of roads.
What the IAS tool did for cities alike was really highlight some of the innovations that they were able to achieve as part of that. For example, it was the first project in Western Australia that utilised what's called warm mix asphalt. which is a type of asphalt which has a much lower embodied energy in it, so we're able to save a lot of carbon emissions because of that. As well as that, we're able to use as subbase recycled crushed concrete. Now we achieved 43% of the imported material coming onto the project was recycled material, which is a very big win for sustainability, but also the use of recycled content in major road projects in West Australia. The City of East Alliance had the challenge of trying to create a pedestrian-friendly environment in a heavy transport utilised area. So as part of that, it utilised urban landscape design that integrated these different types of transport. This particular intersection has incorporated a cycle path, as well as a bus queue jump lane, as well as urban design that is considering things from a pedestrian point of view. City East Alliance, we took the opportunity to install solar power bus shelters as part of that project. That's simply only the shelter at this stage, but we're looking to expand that, so potentially in the future we'll be looking to line out our traffic signals and our street lighting from the power of renewable energy.
I just keep rolling. It goes on only for another couple of minutes, and all of these videos and slides are downloadable off our website. We're looking also at working with the West Australian Government around photovoltaic noise barriers, and examples of this used in Italy reduce noise reduction by up to about 30% and generate electricity through use of pretty significant road reserve areas, and also harnessing energy from vehicle movements. And I might say with progressive road agencies, we're working on some pilot projects for these sorts of initiatives in the future. I put this slide in to talk a little about the way in which this project and other projects are led. At a project level, the project steering group, or the PSG, is led by an industry chair. This industry chair, Ken Michael, AO, is like a knighthood in the new Australian Honours System, was a previous commissioner for main roads and a previous governor of Western Australia. And so these are the sort of leaders, they don't come every day, but these are the sort of leaders that we want to lead our projects to provide a certainty for the research team that they're on track, on time, and for me on budget in terms of delivering outcomes that are relevant. So Ken Michael keeps us honest, keeps the research team honest, and we have 10 people like him across the current projects. And we provide industry reports like that one there. We also work across other industry research agencies so that we're not duplicating research or competing in a space where the sponsors are interested in getting outcomes, not necessarily who's doing it. So we'll work with other CRCs, the Cooperative Research Centre for Low Carbon Living, for example, in this project, and in modules that are specifically identified and jointly badged. In the green public road procurement space, we looked at the way in which procurement processes encourage or discourage green procurement. This was an international project in conjunction with Aalto University in Finland, Swinburne and Curtin University, looking at public road procurement and the way that contracts are structured in respect of greenhouse gas emissions, and over the project life cycle, what sort of opportunities were created or in some instances obstructed by the way in which traditional public procurement takes place. And through looking at agencies across the country, identified opportunities around the initial assessment, around the way that incentives are provided at the project level, recommendations that are specifically to do with the tendering process and the way that we use non-cost criteria in selecting tenders, and the way in which the project monitoring and control is carried out, with specifics for project management, project managers on the job, and specifics for those that are preparing contract documentation to bring the chain of green procurement more closely and strongly connected. In the Integrated Project Environments project, it was around the application of BIM, not in respect of the way that the IT works, but in respect of the way that we need to develop a new set of skills for industry, and how we might measure and compare across projects the performance of projects using BIM integrated through the planning, design, construction and asset management process. We worked across agencies across Australia, but also with Trafikverket, the road and rail authority in Sweden, and have developed a series of recommendations, integrated project environments, and these booklets were available at the check-in counter as you registered. A detailed briefing report for industry about skills development and requirements, and for researchers, a series of research outcomes, and for procurement and contract managers, specific recommendations around contracts for the future. But importantly, we're engaging with the road agencies in a national strategy for BIM adoption in road infrastructure, a 5-year program that looks at programs of pilot projects, looking at basing evidence around specific performance parameters that are available publicly in about a week's time, a coordinated BIM curriculum as recommended through one of the reports, but an agreement on a national strategy at the most senior level and development of industry standards between now and 2019. And we're looking for that adoption at the collection of state road agencies at an Australian level. Flowing from that is a project delivering value with BIM, a whole-of-life approach where a book will be is being developed for industry, which has currently been signed off with Rutledge, a publisher that the CIB uses, and early next year will be a book that provides a context to BIM in respect of strategy and case studies, a detailed step-by-step guide on how to implement based on our earlier work, and a set of dictionaries and enablers that provide a common language for use for what will be a web-based performance management assessment for BIM in both infrastructure and
National Research Centre is a unique blend of industry and government.
This is one of the 3 case studies that we carried out earlier this year.
New generation rolling stock is a 4.4 billion project, which will give us 75 new 6-car sets of Queensland. And the more interesting part is that they'll be fully maintained with a purpose-built depot at Wamelink in Ipswich, which is now connected to the main line. So in a couple of years' time, we'll have a brand new maintenance facility up and running and 75 new 6-car trains. On the Wamelink depot, one of the really interesting innovations that we've used is using BIM. And on that, we had an interactive model so that before we actually dug any holes in the ground, we could tell where the essential services were and make sure that they didn't interfere with any of the other building services, which is a massive step forward in terms of how we increase productivity by using a technique that made sure we use maximum use of new technology as BIM.
BIM and digital engineering, as we have it in the language, wasn't hard to require on the project. It is a technology that we as SBEnrc can use as a unique differentiator and unique offering to our clients. We utilize the technology to manage risk, interface risks, design risk, construction risk, and everything else. And by really being able to visualize an environment before construction takes part of that piece of work, you can make informed decisions against that piece of infrastructure or program works. To resolve issues prior to construction in the model environment allows us to make informed decisions, to bring stakeholders along the journey, and then to make the changes and manage the interface between various bits of structure prior to its impact. On site. 2D doesn't do that. 2D gives you a good chance to achieve maybe 80% of the issue resolution
but that 20% still reflects into standing still side of unplanned works, and unplanned works are usually where accidents happen because you do the things that you're not foreseeing. As the project was designed, is a collaboration between a number of disciplines. Traditionally, they all go around doing their own designs in 2D. Here they've got away done in 2D, plugged it into the 3D environment, and they've had a found what the clashes are, what the problems are up front, as opposed to waiting until they're out in the field trying to resolve it. So from a time perspective, I would say it's saving a bit of time, a lot of heartache as well. On this project, I get an updated version of them every Tuesday. We can look at that and review it. Specific element was signal placement of signals. We were able to sit and go through it with Queensland Rail, have a look at where the signal was placed in relation to theirs. We looked at it in the built environment, and it gave us exactly what we needed to know at that point in time.
So I let it run out the end there because in everything that we do, we're promoting the collaboration between the private sector, the government sector and researchers, and promoting industry associations, professional, labour, and I might say those organisations that might not ordinarily work together as part of the package that brings about change in industry. The most senior level of individuals who sign billion-dollar cheques appear on the video, as well as people who are actually doing the work on site. So we're seeking to get that level of cross-sectoral or cross-supply chain buy-in, and with a lot of effort we can bring it together so that those sorts of videos can be used across all level of management and labour. And sitting behind that are a series of how-to manuals. I wanted to touch base, I'm conscious of the time as is, and I'll finish in a few minutes. Transport network resilience. Now Krishna talked about some of the things that are happening in terms of the changing world, and I wanted to relate it back, and it provides another framework to think about some of the things that are happening in this instance in respect of natural disasters and road infrastructure. About 10 years ago, there was, pun intended, the perfect storm, where three cyclones converged on Australia, Cyclone Monica, Glenda and Larry, and horrific damage was done to communities and to the roads that connect communities across northern Australia. And in common with others in the tropics, you'll see that over the past almost 100 years, more than 200 cyclones across the coast of Australia. So we're very cyclone prone, and these are the sorts of things that happen all too regularly. And when Krishna talks about bounce back, and we need to think more about adapt and transform and improve, those sorts of words will come out in a moment. Some of the recommendations that come in respect of some of the practical aspects, but also the funding and policy aspects. Bushfires, all too common, and I know that you're suffering some of the impact of that. So what we've done is go into different communities in New South Wales, in flood-prone Grafton, in Townsville, cyclone prone, and in Broome in northwest Western Australia, also susceptible to cyclones and flooding, and run workshops with the police, the ambulance, the emergency personnel, where it's appropriate, other emergency services, community leaders, local councils, universities, and where they exist. And look towards what they've identified over the past decade or so of shortfalls in the way that there's been a cross-community response. And we've provided out of those workshops a vision that in the face of natural disasters, our cities and towns will be well prepared and supported to activate an effective response that harnesses leading-edge technologies and practices to minimise disruption to transport networks specifically, and achieves a swift return to normal for our communities and businesses. And out of that process, we've developed both policy and recommendations for practice around improving transport network resilience across these areas. And importantly, let's talk about number one, the assessment of the natural disaster readiness of infrastructure and consideration of betterment options. Traditionally, funding mechanisms from insurance agencies and governments have provided what's called like for like. In other words, if a bridge is at this level and it floods and there's damage to the bridge, the funding agencies provide the funds for a replacement bridge, stupidly at that height. So the opportunity is for us to adapt and transform and improve and build at higher and more robust standards for the future, and to look towards ways in which we can mitigate the damage rather than simply build back and decade after decade build infrastructure that continues to be damaged through similar level events. And a whole range of recommendations come out of those eight ideas. And some analysis around network analysis for fuel availability and location of petrol stations, for example, across the state of Queensland, looking at floods and impact of floods. And for the future, we're looking towards how we can use technologies, including drones, for example, in flood impacted areas, and how we may be able to use this term big data to assist in relieving congestion and deferring capital. Let me just skip through those and finish on this slide. I wanted to provide an advertisement for the CIB. Having been involved in 20 years in research that I highlighted at the beginning since 1995, I've also been involved coincidentally over that same time in the CIB. And the International Council for Research and Innovation in Building and Construction has been a common element in the growth of our networks, the growth of the strength of our Australian investment, but also the value of our research that we're able to benchmark and be informed by other international experts and activities across the world. So if I can recommend your engagement and in terms of managing R&D investment, there's a book that has recently been published through the CIB called R&D Investment and Impact in the Global Construction Industry that provides the examples of various types of research that have been carried out across 20 countries across the globe in terms of the industry problem, the way in which the research was carried out, and what has been the positive impact of research into practice. Step through that, and we're excited.